Well, welcome. I'm Mima Taylor. I'm the minister here at the Cape Town Unitarians, and I am vice chair of the Cape Town Interfaith Initiative. And it is such an honor for me to welcome you here to this program. It has been a blessing to be part of this, to hear the vision of Zabata January, and to bring you all together in this special moment. So for everyone here in the room, welcome. I'm so delighted you're here. And for all of you in South Africa, happy Women's Day, wherever you are at. And for all those that are somewhere else on the planet, we are so grateful that you stayed up late or you got up early to be part of this event. So we welcome you all. Even though we are all in very different places, I know that we are all still connected in our hearts. And so with that, I'm also honored to get the opportunity to introduce Zabata January. Zabata is a Khoi woman. She comes from many generations of Khoi's people, and she has a vision to create unity amongst all people, regardless of tribe, and for us to all identify the indigeneity in us, that we can all be together in our indigeneity. So Zabata, welcome, and thank you for your vision for this beautiful day.
Good morning, everybody, and happy Women's Day and happy Indigenous Day. Thank you all for supporting this initiative, for creating this platform for the voices of women within all backgrounds to be heard, to learn, to share, and to connect. For millennia, my tribe, the Khoi peoples, have been oppressed by a magnitude of situation caused by human greed. Today, I'm standing here with fragments of ancestral wisdom within my soul and an unrecognized identity. Or shall we wrongfully categorize as, shall we call it wrongfully categorized identity? This human greed has resulted in loss of tradition, loss of traditional language, loss of self-worth, and much more. Loss of connection to land. And this is basically what brought this event to life, as we need help to create an inclusive society where all beings and all traditions are acknowledged, respected, and have the opportunity to prosper within their full potential without judgment. We all may not be familiar with the language just being spoken today. I myself do not have the privilege to speak or understand my own traditional language, but my soul makes cartwheels when I receive the sounds of my ancestors. And then I know in my heart that I belong. I would like you to open yourself up to the tones of the feminine voices, the calling, the yearning of Mother Earth, and the calling of our ancestors, so that your soul can receive and understand the unexplained cries and plea for unity, inclusion, acceptance, compassion, sincerity, and global Indigenous womanhood. Let's all listen with an open mind, an open heart to the stories being unlocked with the wisdom of the soil for the good of all. Watinta abafazi, watinta mbukotu. You struck a woman, you struck a rock. Today, 65 years ago, during the heart of apartheid, while under immense oppression, population segregation, and severe inhumane irregularities, 20,000 women united in their diversity, proudly, shamelessly, and fearlessly stood in their womanhood, chanting no more to the South African past laws. Watinta abafazi, watinta imbukotu. You strike a woman, you strike a rock. This courageous and selfless act are the platform for empowerment, appreciation of the value of women within the framework of South Africa and beyond. There is no doubt that due to this act of bravery of these women, that we all can experience a sense of freedom today. This diverse group of women protested, they risked their lives for a sense of freedom for all of us. They fought for the inclusivity of all of us. But unfortunately, as time has passed, it doesn't appear that everybody was integrated into this inclusive South Africa. For what these women have risked their lives and fought for 65 years. 65 years ago. It appears that we went from colonialism to expansionism, from inclusivity to continuous classification, the ticking of boxes of racial classification. As I'm standing here today, should I want to open a business or start a business with me as the CEO, my business would possibly be certified as Black-owned. While on the other hand, if I apply for a job, I will struggle to complete the application if I don't classify myself as belonging to a particular racial group. So why is this issue so sensitive to me? Why is it hitting home? Why is it incapacitating me? Why is it disabling my quality of life? Because there is no box that I can identify myself with. Before I continue, I respect, I appreciate everybody's opinion. I know we're all different. I respect everybody's personal belief, everyone's culture, your gender orientation, your spirituality, your uniqueness. I appreciate that. I don't want any other person, no matter who you are, to feel misplaced and unrecognized in society. So my family history was relayed to me orally. I was told by my father, as from a little girl, that Sabada January, you're not colored. Your ancestry lives within the soil of the southern hemisphere of Africa. You are not a slave. You are a Khoi Aboriginal woman. So the authenticity of Khoi Aboriginal truth, my truth, remain questionable, creating chaos, division amongst our peoples due to millennia of oppression, indoctrination, church influences, colonialism, enslavement, etc. We have lost our tradition, spirituality, language, but most of all, we've lost our connection to the land of our ancestors. My identity, my truth lies within my heart, within my soul, within all of me, seen or unseen. So with judgment or without judgment, I am a Khoi Indigenous woman. I am proud to be a Khoi Indigenous woman. And the soil that we gathered on here today is Khoi Aboriginal land. So now, I would like to introduce to you a woman very close to my heart, a woman very close to my spirit, a woman who didn't hear what I said, she listened. I'm introducing to you Reverend Pippa Jones, an interfaith minister, teacher, and newcomer to South Africa in service to the Cape Town Interfaith Initiative. Thank you.
My sister Zabada, thank you. Thank you also, Nima, for both of your warm welcome. It is also my privilege and my honor to be with you all today. And I wanted for us to take a moment together and center ourselves and begin what we hope will be a beautiful journey into the voices and the wisdom of women and traditional wisdom from around the world. So I know that we have people from almost every time zone. So I'm here today to say good morning to you, good afternoon, and also good evening, and welcome. And I'd love to invite everybody, wherever you are, wherever your feet are, wherever you find yourself, whatever has happened in minutes before, whatever your day has been like, to take a moment and a pause and a breath and draw ourselves into the moment. The gift of breath and the gift of life. And the sacred here and now, the present moment, for it is indeed all that we have. And in gratitude for that breath, in gratitude for this moment, in gratitude for the spirit of Ubuntu, I am because you are. And let me share with you the words of one of my favorite poets, Rainer Maria Rilke. And he wrote this as an elegy, and I want to share it with you as a prayer. Earth, isn't this what you want? to arise in us, invisible? Is it not your dream to enter us so wholly that there's nothing left outside us to see? What, if not transformation, is your deepest purpose? Earth, my love, I want it too, believe me. No more of your springtimes are needed to win me over. Even one flower is more than enough. Before I was named, I belonged to you. I seek no other law than yours, and know that I can trust the death you will bring. See, I live. On what? Childhood and future are equally present. Sheer abundance of being floods my heart. And now we're going to give acknowledgement of land and country, and this will be led by our dear friend and colleague, Reverend Berry Bear, who many of you know as Interfaith Minister, Chair of Cape Town Interfaith Initiative, and a key figure, support and relationship builder in interfaith relations within the city, the nation of South Africa, and beyond. And she has dedicated her work especially to the Cape Flats religious leaders. Reverend Berry, thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Pippa. What an honor it is to present the acknowledgement of land today for our event, Coming Home. Standing with you today, we feel the great spirit of the ages flowing through our collective memory, and we give thanks. We take a moment to reflect deeply on the ground on which we walk and its original custodians who imbued it with their wisdoms. The legacy of the Khoi ancestors of the Western Cape and the ancestral lines of Indigenous peoples around the world lies not only in the wounding that we carry on their behalf, but also in their wisdoms, the innate knowledge of the interconnectedness that we carry within our very selves. The history and stories of their lives flow like an invisible river through all that is manifest today, carrying the whispers of the ancients who founded our nations, and continue to bid us open our minds, our hearts, and our ears to the truth of our unity as brothers and sisters of each other, and of the moon, the trees, the mountain, and the oceans. For wrongs done, we ask forgiveness. For wounds inflicted, we pray healing. We give thanks to our forefathers of greatness for their care of this land. We honor all peoples, all origins, all identities, all those for whom earth is home. May the lessons of the past teach and guide us for the future, illuminating our hearts and those of our leaders towards a new heaven and a new earth in which we walk hand in hand, supporting each other home.
It was our intention today to have one of our beautiful colleagues, a Khoi leader and ceremonial leader, to offer and bring us a special opening ceremony, but unfortunately he has suffered a tragic loss in his family and wasn't able to be with us today. But the beautiful news, and I think that there's always another option, and that definitely has opened itself to us today. I'm speaking to you from the eastern coast of the United States, and it has been my sincere pleasure to have met in person and got to know Chief Dwayne Perry. And I will explain his significance in a moment to what we're doing today. And Chief Dwayne Perry is the elected chief of the Ramapo Lenape Nation here in the area that we now know as New Jersey predominantly, and a lot of New York State. He is an environmental and human rights activist. He was mentored in the establishing of an Indigenous rights group, and which was the precursor to the reformation of the Ramapo Lenape Nation's modern restructuring. He is especially significant to myself and many of my colleagues because he has a vision and is in the process of creating an embassy, a worldwide embassy on traditional native lands here for all Indigenous peoples worldwide. He wanted very much to be with us today, but he's in South Dakota in a different part of the United States, but without my asking, wrote and gifted me with a blessing for today, a blessing in the spirit of National Women's Day here in South Africa, and also a blessing for World Indigenous Peoples Day. And Zabada will be reading his blessing to us and then playing a few moments of a song, which he also said he would love us to play. So we're going to consider that our opening ceremony. So first, Zabada, if you don't mind sharing, thank you so much.
As you have come through many storms, holding humanity within your arms, we the children are grateful for we have survived. We have survived. We have been made free as we have been held above the storm on the rock of a woman. We have been given life as the water which ran through the first woman, which runs in the most sacred of ways. Through each and every one of you, making each of you the most sacred beings. That which the divine has given you is the water of life. For surely as the water which runs through each of you ran through the first woman, that which makes all of us human, has been given to us from the rock of a woman. Do not fear, but know you are divine. March forward, stand strong. Do not be deterred by fools. You have given life. And in the guidance of that life, you hold dominion. Be blessed, for it's a sacred thing. You are a woman. Anushiki, Anushiki, Anushik, Anushik, by Chief Perry. Hike, I am there. Thank you.
And now the song that we will sing. Strong Woman Song. We live our life the best way we know how. The path we walk will lead our future generations. I walk in beauty and in hope that my children will carry the songs I sing for their children.
feel blessed in that I'm reminded that it's my human right to speak my truth and to give insight of my ancestral history, the forgotten people. The First Nation, the Khoi, whether you feel that my truth is bizarre or subjective, you have the right to decide based on your belief, or you can embrace my truth. It is my human right to speak my truth the way history was relayed to me with a tongue. Khoi history isn't documented. The Europeans had the human right to write what suited them, while our history was passed on orally, and that is what must be respected. We deserve that respect. After 27 years of democracy and a new government system that's supposed to accommodate and support a diverse nation, Ubuntu, the Rainbow Nation, Madiba's dream, which should include the true Indigenous peoples. But our truth doesn't feature. We were declared dead in a writing by the Europeans and their supporters, who chose to believe that, to gain control of the lost world. Our claims were said to be subjective and not supportive. Or is the system trying to throw a blind eye to the true reality? According to European literature, which is the most influential support of history, we were nomads traveling from place to place. Our culture, our personas were depicted as bizarre, and we were described to be closer to animal rather than just human. Before the first European set foot on the coast of the southernmost point of Africa, we were here, thriving along the coastline. Before slaves and immigrants were released, which started District 6, we were thriving and we were protected by the lost world. Before an Australian planted his Jackson trees in the dunes, we were already here. Before German settlers invaded our space in the dunes because of our water resources, we were already here. Before the Wesleyan Mission Society discovered us and the Methodists declared our home a mission station, we were here. Before DF Malan Airport became a thought, which is now known as, what is it called? Cape Town International, we were here. Before the eviction of people from District 6, starting the group areas such as Cape Flats, Mitchell's Plain, Nova Park, Athlone, we were here. Before Khayelitsha Nyanga, Gugulethu even became a thought, we were here. Before the Europeans gained the confidence to explore the lost world, we were here. Before maps and routes of the lost world were drawn up, we were here. Our history, our tongue, and deaths, our tombstones, it speaks our truth. So where is here? Here is along the shoreline of the southernmost point of Africa. Here is the now overpopulated and polluted lost world. Here is van see tot rivier tot berg, as my forefathers described it. Home Home is water onder die klipfontein. Here is our safe haven, our oasis, where our continued existence is being threatened as we speak. So lastly, if you travel from Cape Town to Strand on the N2, you will see on your right-hand side an undeveloped community right opposite the airport lights. So that is where we are, and that is the home to the Khoikhoi. As a matter of fact, today we're celebrating Women's Day and International Indigenous Day on Khoi Aboriginal land, the land of our ancestors. Thank you. I have the honor and the privilege now to introduce a message from Dr. Mampela Rampele, who is a political thinker, a global servant, a doctor, an academic, a business expert. She is the co-founder of Reimagine SA, as well as the co-president of the Club of Rome. Let's listen to the message by Dr. Rampele. Thank you.
I'm Mampela Rampele, the co-founder of Reimagine South Africa and co-president of the Club of Rome. I am grateful that you have asked me to speak about gratitude, because I was brought up in a village where we were taught to forever be grateful. Grateful when you wake up for the gift of life, grateful for the gift of family, for the gifts of nature, and all others. This indigenous wisdom of gratitude was reinforced by the Christian faith that I was brought up with in my family. The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us again about the wisdom of indigenous knowledge that what matters in life is life itself, which is why in my culture, we are constantly reminded that I am because you are. Your being human is only meaningful if you recognize the interconnectedness and the interdependence of humanity and our dependence on the gifts of nature. We as women in my culture are designated as the bearers of the seed. Not only the seed of generations, but also in agricultural societies, the gift of keeping the seeds safe for the next planting season. And when you go out planting, you've got to plant with gratitude and joy. That way, we were taught, you will reap abundantly. I am pleased that you have chosen this day, Women's Day, here in South Africa, to celebrate gratitude, hope, and the joy of being human. May we rise from this celebration, determined to be faithful custodians of the seed and the bearers of an attitude of gratitude, which will enable us to live in hope and joy. I thank you.
So now, I have the honor to introduce to you Reverend Mahrama Winder, who is the co-founder and spiritual director of the Sephira Institute, an advisor to Auckland Interfaith Council, an end-of-life midwife, a senior mentor, an advocate for women's life transitions, education and empowerment. Her work bridges cultures in the Northern and Southern Hemisphere. Herewith, Reverend Marama Winder.
Thank you for that introduction, Zabada. Tena koto, tena koto, tena koto katoa. Greetings, everyone, from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I am so grateful and honored to have been invited into this global, beautiful circle on National Women's Day and the International Day of Indigenous Peoples. I would like to begin briefly by acknowledging this land here, as well as the land of my birth and ancestors. I acknowledge Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, or as my dear friend and colleague Makwini Tai says, the land of eternal light. I acknowledge the Tanata Whenua, the Maori people of this land, and all the tribes Iwi and Hapu. I acknowledge my mountain, my river, my ancestors, my land, and my parents. So I begin in the traditional Maori way with my pepeha, where coming home honors land and language, ancestors and teachers, young and seasoned. I understand that these words will be given to everyone after today, and so there'll be a translation of the Maori words for you. Ko Tom toko Mona, ko Connecticut toko Awa, ko United toko Waka, ko Americana, Scottish, Russian, Polish, German, Dutch, and deep American, Powhatan, toko iwi. Ko Teherenga, Waka Oriwa, toko Morai, ko Massachusetts aho, ke Oriwa, toko Kaina Inanane, ko Whangaparoa, toko Kura, ko Coddington, Hendrickson, Wotazik, toko Whānau, my family. Ko Harold, toko Matua, ko Francis, toko Whaia, ko Fetu Marama Winder, toko Ingwa. Tena koto, tena koto, tena koto katoa. I honor the land of Whangaparoa and my birthlands of Western Massachusetts and the Connecticut River Valley. I honor the ancestors of this land, as well as my ancestors across the seas, and my Powhatan tribe from Turtle Island. It's late winter here and it's late at night, very cold on a Monday evening, but the constellation, the Southern Cross, shines brightly in the southern sky right above me. I'm going to introduce Dr. Catherine Jones, my colleague and friend, and who will be giving you a message very soon. I first met Dr. Catherine Jones at a gathering of women who advocate and act for women's empowerment. Kate's heritage on her father's side includes Ngāti and Ngāwaiwariki, the tribes from the Whanganui region. The Whanganui is located on the west coast south of the North Island. And you probably know there are two islands of Aotearoa, the North Island and the South Island. The Whanganui Awa, the river, is Aotearoa's longest navigable waterway. Kate also holds Celtic and Belgian ancestry, and she often describes her life journey as walking between two worlds, something that I imagine many of us here can relate to. One of the many things that struck me about Kate's life and work is her commitment to the values of integrity and the vital need for the voice of honesty in the world and honesty in social media, which is her field. She has been on a continuing quest to teach young people to go deeper in their work, to place concern for truth and justice very high. It was a privilege when Kate asked me to collaborate with her to write a paper on one of the most critical global social issues for girls and women. Our paper about girls for sale and Facebook's involvement in this issue was accepted to be delivered in Bogota last year, but was disrupted by COVID. We learned that if the sale of girls is not disrupted, by 2030, there could be 1 billion girls under 18 in marriages that often damper or halt altogether their choices in life and in education. Dr. Kate's audio contribution speaks to one of the points we make in our paper, that there are limits and limitations of social media to the voices of women and girls, and especially to Indigenous women and girls' voices, and how we must continue to advocate and act for new standards that are all inclusive. Kate has a long work life in both psychology and education, and as she prepares for walking a new path from the university, her next mahi, her next work, is writing and thinking as she also tends the land she and her husband and son looked after as kaitiaki, as guardians, in Wainui, north of Auckland. There's a Maori whakatoki that says, what is the most important thing? He tanata, he tanata, he tanata. It is people, it is people, it is people. So it is my pleasure to introduce my friend Aoama and my colleague, Dr. Catherine Jones. Ngā mihi nui, and thank you.
Kia ora, everybody. Where does social media come from? And is it a good idea? Can social media help women's voices? What can we do about Indigenous voices? Shall we keep using social media to help Indigenous women and girls raise their voices? Is this a good idea? Think about these questions. If I pass to the next slide, we might be thinking about human rights and how Indigenous women and girls can preserve their human rights while playing the social media game. That's a real question, and we're not really sure if it's answerable under the current systems. If I think about human rights and social media, I need to realise that social media is an industry with transnational players, and they're participating in what we call a mega market. So the rules of social media are created by the transnational players, not the participants. Is this fair? We have so many questions and not many answers. But what we really want to be focusing on is what role can social media users play in creating legitimacy for the platforms and a legitimate platform for raising their voices. And here I'm thinking particularly of Indigenous women and girls being able to play in the social media space and being able to raise their voices about issues that concern them. So how do social media community standards that are aimed at managing the users help facilitate raising the voices of Indigenous women and girls? I'm not sure at the moment that social media community standards do help. I think that community standards on the whole fail to protect women and girls from harmful online abuse, and I think that is a particular problem for Indigenous women and girls. So what could be different? We need to look at the framing of social media communities within the large industry sector, and we need to think about how the communities are framed so we can make sense of how people are able to participate in this social media sector. So we need to think about how others talk in social media, or what linguistic tools are used by stakeholders or social actors to shape and manipulate the legitimacy of a range of voices over time. I already mentioned that mega marketing is where social media platforms sit, and the social media platform market originates from America, the capitalist West, and in fact from Silicon Valley. And overall, the idea is for the social media platforms to make profit and to enable people to engage in free speech. But I'm not so sure that the speech is as free as we would wish it to be. So, for example, we already know that the way social media platforms are framed easily lend themselves to abuse of women and girls, and in particular to online abuse of Indigenous women and girls. This is partly because the way that the spaces are framed where people can talk, we find that many men dominate those spaces, and often the prevailing language that is used is misogynistic, and it is also race-based. So an Indigenous woman or girl is very brave putting herself out there. She is likely to attract a lot of online abuse, or what we would call cyber abuse, and there's plenty of research to show that. So what can we do? Well, we need to think about other ways that community standards can be formulated to empower users, and that's to empower all users, including Indigenous women and girls. We need to think about how the community standards match up with cultural practices that are used to harm women and girls, particularly race-based or ethnic-based stereotypes. And we need to lean hard on those platforms to make sure that they're listening and that they take account of the whole of their user base, not just the privileged few. This was Dr. Catherine Jones from Ngāti Apa Ngāwairiki, located in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and just a few thoughts to share with you about how Indigenous women and girls need to be able to think hard about how they're playing in the social media space.
I would like to introduce to you Patton and Reverend Nkumisa Mpapalala, and is a dear friend of mine, and Reverend, as well as Reverend Nkumisa, who is a leader of the South African Religious Western Cape, and is the Secretary General and a leader at Church High Calling Global International Ministry Mfuleni, and will be given a special introduction later in the program, so I'll leave it for that. Okay, so we will be continuing with a blessing. Divine Spirit, hear us.
Heilige Gees, hoor ons.
Elosi ons Kadare.
Creator of humankind, all beings, the earth, the stars, the moon, the skies, and all that is within. The all-knowing, who knows when the sun will rise and when it will set, who knows each of us by name. Divine Spirit of our ancestors and of us, hear us.
Moya onwele simbe. Rabana Samina. May we all heal, soul, body, and mind. May we live happily and healthily. May we become mindful and appreciative of our differences with deep love and compassion.
Divine Spirit, hear us.
Moya ohalaleng liut. Shema kolenu Adonai. May we listen deeply and react kindly. May we be grateful for every moment, every experience, and seek goodwill for all in our choices and our actions.
Divine Spirit, hear us.
Elos ons in aardager. Heilige Gees, hoor ons.
May we all come wise, live our purpose, and be of service to all your creation.
Divine Spirit, hear us. Heilige Gees, word ons.
Elosipos kadare, Elosipos kadare, Elosipos kadare, Elosipos kadare, Elosipos kadare, Elosipos kadare, Elosipos kadare. So now we are going all the way to Australia. Let me introduce to you Reverend Shilani McRae, Interfaith Minister, who is a friend and a colleague of Reverend Pippa Jones. Together, they co-founded the Sydney Sacred Centre in Sydney, Australia in 2017. Thank you, Shilani.
Thank you. And Yama, which is hello in Gamilaroi, which is the language north of the state I live in New South Wales, here in Australia. Some 3 to 4 years ago, Reverend Pippa Jones and I, as co-founders of Sydney Sacred Centre, introduced Miriam Rose Gunma Bauman to our interspiritual community here in Sydney, Australia. And with her permission and blessing, we shared the practice of Dididi to our community. It is a joy and honour to be invited to introduce Miriam Rose and the practice of Dididi to a worldwide community as we are here today. The scene you see behind me is of Miriam's beloved Daly River, where her mob is from. It is not where I am right now. Right now it's late at night on a Monday evening in winter in Sydney, Australia, in one of the suburbs. So excuse my bleary eyes for the lateness that it is right now. In Australia, as a sign of respect and as a non-Aboriginal person, we commence all events with an acknowledgement of country. So allow me. I acknowledge the traditional owners, the Gweagal people of the Dharawal speaking clan who have cared for this land in time beyond our dreaming. They are the custodians of the land on which I live and work, and I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge that this land was taken from the First Peoples without their consent, treaty or compensation. I recognise that this land was, is and always will be Aboriginal land. At this point, I share with you that there is sensitivity with the terminology when referring to the traditional owners of Australia. With deep respect, I will refer to them as Aboriginal. Many Indigenous languages have a word that means something like deep listening. In Nungi Kurungu, a Northern Territory language, that word is dadidi. Can we start the the visual now, please? Miriam Rose is a renowned elder and educator from the Indigenous community of Nauyu. She describes her people as river people, the river being the previously mentioned Daly River, the region where they live. The Daly River is famous for barramundi, crocodiles, and water lilies, particularly lotus lilies. And that's Miriam with the beautiful water lilies from her region. Dr. Ngumo Bowman is the 2021 Senior Australian of the Year, a groundbreaking leader in remote Indigenous education, and a celebrated painter, activist, writer, and speaker. Just have a little bit of a lag here, sorry. In 1988, she established the Miriam Rose Foundation. Its aim is to make a difference for young Indigenous people, using the 4 pillars of art, culture, education, and opportunity. The Miriam Rose Foundation helps young Indigenous people walk in 2 worlds: their precious Indigenous world, with its strong connection to the land, its traditions, languages, and cultural teachings, and the syncretic world of modern Australia, with tertiary education, organised economies, industry, and infrastructure. We're just running a little bit ahead now of with the slides. Miriam Rose is an advocate for a kind of listening, Dadidi, a Nauyu word that means quiet, still awareness and deep inner listening that sums up a whole way of being. Miriam Rose says, you've got to be aware at all times of people, where you are, nature. Miriam Rose, referring to her people, says, Dadidi is what makes us who we are. Based on respect, it is a contemplative practice that connects the Nauyu people to the spirit within themselves and within the land. As Dadidi spreads over the whole of life, it renews and heals, bringing wholeness and peace. Dadidi calls us to slow down and connect to being present. Part of Dadidi is about opening the spirit and allowing the earth to heal and repair the sorrowing moments of life. It is pertinent at this point to share with you the Ulurus Statement from the Heart. It was created in 2017 and represents a historic consensus of Indigenous leaders in seeking constitutional change to recognise First Australians through a voice to Parliament. To share about it as it truly deserves requires more time than we have here now. Our team at Sydney Sacred Centre deeply immersed ourselves into the elements of the statement when introducing it to our Sydney community. I encourage you to look into it yourself after today's event. It is truly moving and inspiring. The last stanza particularly so. I'll share it with you. In 1967, we were counted. In 2017, we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. Miriam Rose calls us to really listen to Indigenous people and to pay proper attention to the land we all live in. Dadidi is about awakening. It can awaken in all of us if we commit to learning and listening, to opening minds and hearts, to respect and understanding each other better. Stillness brings peace, understanding and awareness. As you become more aware, you begin to grow into who you are. And then your responsibility becomes about sharing your wisdom. In embracing Dadidi personally, I realised that Dadidi is more than a word or a concept. It is a way of being. It goes with you, impelling you to leave nothing unchanged in the making of a more inclusive, more just, more hospitable world for all. So now I ask you to take a breath and settle within yourself as we share with you a video which the Miriam Rose Foundation produced to introduce us to her teaching on Dadidi. It is local to the traditional land of her people and also national in its call to the nation of Australia. but of course, it is universal in its truth and wisdom.
To know me is to breathe with me. To breathe with me is to listen deeply. To listen deeply is to connect. It's a sound, the sound of deep calling to deep. Dadidi, the deep inner spring inside us. We call on it, and it calls on us. We are river people. We cannot hurry the river. We need to move with the current and understand its ways. We wait for the rain to fill our rivers and water our thirsty earth. We watch our bush foods and wait for them to open before we gather them. We wait for our young people as they grow. The time for rebirth is now. If our culture is alive and strong and respected, it will grow. It will not die, and our spirit will not die. I believe that the spirit of Dadidi that we have to offer will blossom and grow. Not just within ourselves, but in our whole nation.
Thank you very much, Shalani, and a deep bow of gratitude and honor to Miriam Rose and her foundation and her teachings. And in a moment, I'm going to pass you over to our beloved friend, colleague, Anne. But before I do so, I think it feels appropriate to really take on board this teaching of Dadiri, even just for a moment, and to allow ourselves just a brief opportunity to enter the power of the deep listening to which she's calling all of us, to listen to all that is, to listen to ourselves, who we really are, our wounds, our joys, our accomplishments, our failures, our hopes, our yearnings, to welcome them all and do, as Rumi says, to kiss them. To listen to each other, recognize how often we don't listen. We don't allow the voice of the other to teach us, to guide us, to humble us. To listen to history, where we have come from ultimately affects where we want to go and where we're able to go. To listen to wisdom and teaching from our ancestors, from those who've gone before us, and to listen to Mother Earth, to her cries, to her yearnings, to her pain, but also to the gift of her sustenance and her provision and her beauty. The gift of Dadiri. And with a heart very full now of so much gratitude, I want to hand over to Anne Bothwell Patton, who is a depth counselor and a mindfulness teacher who works with trauma and grief in both her private practice and also within refugee communities in predominantly Cape Town, South Africa. She has a particular interest in the effects of intergenerational trauma. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Pippa. I so appreciate that. And I so appreciate what you've just said and all the wisdom we've got from coming from far as well. One of the things that immediately this opportunity here is honouring today of women and of the Indigenous communities worldwide under the theme of coming home. And I love that idea of coming home, because just as you spoke to it, Pippa, that sense of us coming home and listening deeply is attuning to something deep within ourselves. And it's almost like finding an alignment with something that's already there. And so that aspect is what I want to talk to, because as I start my talk on trauma, I want to encourage a sense of coming back to your own true nature, what you were born to be on this earth, which comes from, of course, your genealogy and your line, but also comes from a sense of what's been offered to you to do on this earth. And we always look to see how people are, what their natural gifts are, what their skills are. And of course, children often show where they're naturally inclined. So often one will remember it from childhood, that sense of what you naturally love doing. And so we want to remind you of that true nature. In trauma, you're often robbed of a sense of coming to it fully because it's shrunk, it's slightly limited in some form because of the trauma. So we're always trying to incline and come through the work into an expression, a full expression of who you are on this earth. So starting with that, and first of all, I want to acknowledge that in the trauma world, of course, it's women and it's Indigenous communities that tend to have got a huge, larger extent of the trauma or the violence, the sense of violence, disproportionate, so we're looking at the kind of sense of them having had a sense of being silenced, a sense of violence, too much violence, and an interruption to who they really are. So we want to just acknowledge that right now. We're looking at it individually, we're looking at it collectively, and we're looking at it in the line, in the intergenerational sphere. I'm from a background where my mother was a child of 10 in the Second World War, had to overnight pick up a suitcase and flee, had to literally get on a boat, didn't know where she was going, came back down to Mozambique, and my whole line from her side ended up in South Africa. So the trauma of that, what a person is able to do in terms of the work that's happened, what's happened to them in terms of something so large, is been my teacher, because often her work that maybe she isn't able to do, I have to do. So there is the sense of how do I pick up on something that's passed to me, and what is the work that I'm called to in it, and then what's also my own work, so that my future, my children and my community can also benefit. So we're looking at it all of like that, with a rounded sense of it. So trauma, what does it do? Well, it immediately hijacks you. It takes you, it hijacks your physiology. It hijacks your neurology. It hijacks you emotionally and then relationally, how you interconnect. It hijacks and limits things. It limits you and makes you feel inflexible, and it narrows your consciousness. So people living with trauma often have that sense of being pulled in and constricted like that. It affects our brain function and our ability to self-regulate, to come back to equilibrium, and to stay in tune, therefore, with ourselves and with others when we're unable to come to that equilibrium. We get locked into states in our nervous system, and there's incredible work, of course, done by Stephen Porges, which is all the polyvagal theory, and people like Deb Dana who've taken it on. How do you work with the trauma in someone and yourself, relating through the body, through the system that is where you get locked in, quite often the nervous system. So we look at that. How do we normally in a nervous system, you activate for a moment of fight, flight, or if it's too much, freeze, but then you deactivate, you come out of it. And what we do in our society and the levels of trauma that we live with is that we activate into it and we live in it. And this is incredibly exhausting. So often people with trauma will feel very, very tired. There's a sense of exhaustion of keeping this going, keeping that system going. So there's so much to say, but I can only just say a few things in the area. And some of it is when we think of this constriction, what do we do to treat it? There's such a range of how you treat it. One, I don't ever see it as these are the ways you do it. It's each person has got to weave their own basket. I like to see it as that. There are lots of things coming in that will weave through to actually hold the person and their personality and their background. So what are those things that can weave in, that can come in? First of all, it's a knowledge that one needs that. Second of all, it's a sense of where can you get that containment, that sense where you are not so overwhelmed, don't feel so helpless, and don't feel so out of control. So we're always wanting that place of where does it, often a safe place, a place that can hold you. And then we want to try and understand the reactions and the symptoms that come up. And in understanding them, we can often see that there are survival responses that are there. It's our survival responses. It's nothing wrong with you. It's your survival responses taking over. And that's a key issue and element in how we hold our trauma. So in working with suffering and working with your own suffering and coming to it, often we have to do it quite gently, and we always do it with an atmosphere of compassion. As the physician Gabo Mate said, it's not so much looking at a prisoner or looking at somebody who's addicted. What's wrong with you? What's happened? It's like, what's actually happened to you? What's happened to you that's made you move in these ways? What's happened to you? So there's a compassionate, what's happened in your line with you? And often you'll find major trauma, which is the reason behind. So knowing what's actually happening in your system is so important, and acknowledging that we have an incredibly intelligent system. Our brain and our nervous system, everything is construing towards trying to help you survive. So acknowledging that our brain and body is trying to do that. The work has to be done in two ways. It has to be done in the cognitive, in the way of processing, understanding, settling. And at the same time, it's got to be done from the body, so the body can keep the score, as they said one book. I'll talk to you about it later. The body keeps the score. It holds it in the body. It remembers what's happened, and it often stays in those states. You've got to help it release from the body, residue releasing from the body, regulation, and coming to some sort of integration in the brain. So often you'll do things that are related to the brain down, like you'll work with EMDR, or you'll work with therapeutic talking therapies, or you'll work with mindfulness. And often that will affect the brain and the processing, symbolic work, and it'll then filter down into the body. Or you work in the body, or together you work in the body, and then it filters up to the brain, like tension release exercises, yoga, breathing, things that all the many body work ways of working with the body. So finding what suits you. I always see it as having almost like flailing electricity. It's almost like lines of electricity in us that we have to in some way find a way of integrating and connecting, creating a place of integration, and then the whole system can settle. And once the system's settled, we then can see more clearly. But when it's flailing, you have that feeling of agitation, or you have that feeling of being slightly frozen, and the way you view the world is different because of that. So we have to do our work to integrate and settle. And the work we do passes on, always, passes back, passes forward. So the psychiatrist and author Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the book, Body Keeps the Score, he said, trauma is a public health issue Trauma treatments, neuroscience, politics, all intertwined. Poverty, inferior education, housing issues, form these trauma loops, all these systems that have created inequalities, that have created trauma loops, people suffering. And we've got to acknowledge that those systems have to be looked at, deeply looked at. But at the same time, where we are right now, we can call on the legal system, the medical system, the teaching system, our parents, everyone getting informed about trauma so that we understand and can acknowledge what's in front of us and work with it better, understand what's happening and work with it better. We don't understand it enough. And in these loops that we have in our systems of politics and at home, we ended up with another side that also forms a tension, which is our Ubuntu. I am because you are. And that sense of that deep connectedness, of our interconnectedness to both each other and to all things living. And we are tuned to that. We want to notice and acknowledge those two things, that we belong, that we have a place, that we are seen for our suffering and that we can get through it. So I conclude today with an invitation to firstly to honor your own unique nature, to hold it as best you can with deep respect and kindness. And then when you're ready to start the work, or you continue with the work, do so. A calling to do our work, our trauma work. And in turn, as you start to get more connected to yourself and those deep waters start to run within you, they will start to flow into your family. And then the family will flow into the community. And from the community, it'll flow into your town, into your city. It'll flow into all, it'll carry on flowing. And it starts right here, and it starts right now. It starts with me, and it starts with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and for that valuable information. So now, I'm going to present to you Alzana, who had Alzana, due to unforeseen circumstances, unfortunately cannot be here today. However, we're sending her a radiant light of healing. Alzana is a Khoi woman and a creative Afrikaans poet who aspires to evolve a genre in poetry to create awareness, educate, and inspire the youth and future generations. We'll play a video of Alzana's poem now.
My ronde oorsprong, my mond, 'n ronde instrument, my trane, ronde druppels van emosie. En tog stort ek my emosies uit op 'n reguit lyn wat verdwyn, en my ronde oorsprong word omskep in ronde klankgolwe en word filtreer deur koolstofdioksied, en ek gee geboorte aan 'n lied wat grafte oopgrawe, roep jou bloedlyne op, bloedlyne wat verander na paragrawe, wat verander na bladsye, familieresepte diep in die krye, wat herkenning gee aan ondergrondse beendere, geskiedenis vasgetrap met stof, bloed en ink, en keer weer terug na stof en ink, 'n suiwer logika wat my 'n bietjie laat dink, my baarmoeder frekwensie op 'n hoër dimensie, my vrouwese gekoppel aan my tong wat klap, 'n geluid in my bloedstroom ingespuit, en my open frekwensies in my sielsdimensies wat hardop op die spoed van ink, 'n vibrasie wat soos donderweer klink, 'n geluid wat my oë laat rek, my geskiedenis ingeperk, my kinders verkoop vir 'n halwe brood, my emosie is intens, my woede wild, toetsers van my geduld. En ek breek los soos my DNA ontplof, my vrouwdimensie op 'n DNA-frekwensie, want jy's uit proporsie. Kom les jou dors hier binne in my boesem, waar my fondasie uitgeskilder is, my vrou wees wat jou dors kan blus, 'n hele nageslag in my kus, kom rus. Want die berge roep my naam, my ontmoeting met die heilige maan, vermaan, bemoedig, versterk, aanspoor en herinner God my van my vrouwese ingekleur met 'n soet geur, begeer ek na herkenning, my gevoelens uitgestort op klippe, 'n kleurvolle diep sielstaal van my lippe, soos ek bid vir reën, my skrif lees op 'n growwe steen, nagelate uitgekerfde soos 'n spieël, reflek dit my siel, kom kniel. By my waterput, uitgeput en die dorste, lewendige water in my borste vloei in die mond van die Rowersee, woestyne en diepe riviere, 'n natuurlike waterloop waar ek gevorm was in my moeder se skoot, soos Adam se rib was ek soos 'n roos gepluk soos 'n roos wat groei uit 'n droë krake van 'n woestyn. Ingeseën en gesalf, 'n koning hang in God se domein, soos moeder aarde met 'n siel, omskep in 'n tydfossiel. Ons is die portaal vir ons generasies, ons is die weerkaatsing van vrouwies, ons is kreatief aan mekaar geweef, van ons tone tot die punte van ons neus.
And I'm now honored to introduce Rian de Villas, the dominee at Groot Kerk. When I asked Rian how we would describe him, he said he just tries to follow the way of Jesus through love and service towards peace. So Rian, thank you for being here with us.
Dear friends, sisters and brothers, I'm humbled and honored by the privilege to add my voice to this great tapestry of voices that we've heard today. I would like to start by celebrating and acknowledging the women and also the rich and diverse community of Cape Town in which I was born and which have come to shape me and guide me and teach me and inform me also in my own journey towards peace and shalom here in Cape Town. I'm grateful to be part of different collaboration platforms like the Cape Town Interfaith Initiative, the Cape Flats Interfaith Initiative, the District 6 Interfaith Working Group, the Defend Our Democracy Collective, a lot of groups where I was able to be formed and shaped and to work together towards shalom. It is here that I have met new friends and colleagues, and ever since I have experienced and felt the kinship of fellow pilgrims seeking justice and working together for peace in our city and in the world we live in, meeting beautiful and amazing people and carrying each other's burdens in the process. I'm grateful and blessed to be on this journey with each one of you, and I have been enriched and blessed by your presence and influence on my life and the shaping of my own worldview. Also during my own hardships and my own troubles, you have been supportive and have shown me much love. I thank you for your love and your kindness and your generosity. I remember since being a small child in Cape Town, I was captivated by the mountain and in love with the mountain. Whenever we traveled away and we came back, when we see the mountain, we knew that we were home, we were coming home. It is with this in mind that I would like to reflect on the spiritual significance and the sacredness of this mountain, this place where we gather around, the slopes of the Hurikwahu, the mountain of the sea, or Table Mountain as we call it, the heart of our city. The city is built around this beautiful mountain. This mountain carries the footprints of our ancestors, the place where our forebears indulged in the sweet waters of Kamissa. When you go for a walk on the many paths that lead up to the top of the mountain, You will find a lot of smiles along the way. Big smiles, little smiles, exhausted smiles, fit smiles, hopeful smiles, sense of achievement smiles, a lot of friendly small talk along the way. I've been offered water and something to eat as I've journeyed up, and I have had the privilege to share my water with somebody else. Why is it so on the mountain? Is it because we have journeyed in the same way? We have faced the same challenge and the same struggle to get to the top. We give and we receive while we are climbing together and passing one another on the journey to the top. We give and receive and share advice, share dangers, inform about obstacles, give and receive encouragement. You will always find people going up and down the mountain. They are either resting, reflecting, sharing, assisting, and pushing themselves to go further. It's one of the best places for me to reflect, to climb up the mountain, look down at the city, think about what I've gone before, and also to get a better understanding of how small I actually am in this whole big picture and how big God must be. And you also see the bigger picture and where you fit into this wonder of creation and life that we all share. I believe we need to climb mountains together, literally and figuratively. We need to rest and reflect together on the gifts we have received to share. In saying this, I'm also aware that we are also cursed by a lot of other mountains in our life. The mountains of inequality, the mountains of prejudice, of injustice, of crime, of gender-based violence, of corruption, of an ecological crisis. Big mountains. But as an African city, we need to start climbing these mountains together in the African spirit of Ubuntu. It starts with us. It is us that need to understand the principles of Ubuntu in our faith traditions anew, and to start to live by it, demonstrating it to our communities and teaching it to our children. I'm privileged to have 2 daughters myself. We need to teach Ubuntu. I am because you are. The challenge is huge when we try to work for peace. But we need to continuously find each other and experiment with working together for peace. As former President Nelson Mandela said in 1999 while speaking in the Grote Kerk, I quote, "Selfishness, corruption, a lack of community spirit and neighborly services, these are the spiritual enemies of our efforts to build a new society in which we can all live together in decency." It would be superfluous for me to elaborate on the role of the church in this task of moral reconstruction. You will know it much better than I do. What I can say is that the way in which the different churches, the different religions work together and reach out to each other will set an example for the rest of the country. We live in a beautiful, diverse world. We stand in awe of the glory of creation. And we are stunned by confessing that God is so much bigger, gracious, and loving than we can ever imagine or behold, and that God is ultimately good. Justice, love, and peace is central to all our religions. With the recent death of Swiss Catholic priest and theologian Hans Küng on 6 April 2021, I was drawn again to the Declaration of Global Ethic that was authored by Hans Küng and was adopted by the Parliament of World Religions. And I want to share that with you. We declare, we are interdependent. Each of us depends on the well-being of the whole. And so we have respect for the community of living beings, for people, animals, and plants, and for the preservation of earth, the air, water, and soil. We take individual responsibility for all we do. All our decisions, actions, and failures to act have consequences. We must treat each other as we wish others to treat us. We make a commitment to respect life and dignity, individuality and diversity, so that every person is treated humanely without exception. We must have patience and acceptance. We must be able to forgive, learning from the past but never allowing ourselves to be enslaved by memories of hate, opening our hearts to one another. We must sink our narrow differences for the cause of our world community, practicing a culture of solidarity and relatedness. We consider humankind our family. We must strive to be kind and generous. We must not live for ourselves alone, but should also serve others, never forgetting the children, the aged, the poor, the suffering, the disabled, the refugees, and the lonely. No person should ever be considered or treated as a second-class citizen, or be exploited in any way whatsoever. There should be equal partnership between men and women. We must not commit any kind of sexual immorality. We must put behind us all forms of domination or abuse. We must strive for a just social and economic order in which everyone has an equal chance to reach full potential as a human being. We must speak and act truthfully and with compassion, dealing fairly with all and avoiding prejudice and hatred. We must not steal. We must move beyond the dominance of greed for power, prestige, money, and consumption to make a just and peaceful world. Earth cannot be changed for the better unless the consciousness of individuals is changed first. We pledge to increase our awareness by disciplining our minds, by meditation, by prayer, or by positive thinking. Without risk and the readiness to sacrifice, there can be no fundamental change in our situation. Therefore, we commit ourselves to this global ethic, to understanding one another, and to socially beneficial peace-fostering and nature-friendly ways of life. We invite all people, whether they're religious or not, to do the same. May God grant us the wisdom, the courage, the strength, and the heart for this journey together in our city. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to the journey ahead, and take great courage and inspiration in knowing that you are my fellow pilgrims on this journey. Thank you.
It's a great privilege to be able to sing this song. I consider this one of the great prayers in world spirituality. It comes from the Lakota prayer, and I will let Joseph Marshall describe what this means. The song is called Aho Mitakuya Oyasi. In traditional Lakota culture, the simplest prayer we can say is Mitakuya Oyasin, which means all my relatives.
lovely uplifting offering. And thank you, Rian and Andy, for that, for those extraordinary offerings of your wisdom. It is my pleasure now to introduce our next speaker. She is the keeper of the White Lions, and she's an author, she's a conservationist for many, many years, and she is a woman of great wisdom. Linda Tucker is the founder of the Global White Lion Protection Trust, as well as the founder and CEO of the Linda Tucker Foundation. And she has a life mission to restore balance and harmony between human systems and ecosystems. I give you Linda Tucker.
Women's Day today should be celebrated in an acknowledgement that it is also Indigenous Peoples' Day. And for me, it goes further than that. It should be celebrated together with Earth Day, together with Mother's Day. And the invitation for us as women is to find our indigeneity, that quality that crosses all divides, all disciplines, all creeds, all prejudices, and takes us right back to the original purpose, which is to serve Mother Earth. So that is what Women's Day is for me. And in my teachings on lion-hearted leadership, there are many laws of nature that assist humanity to become our true natures. But those that I'm going to be calling on right now in my understanding of womanhood are the 4th law of nurturance and the 6th law of regeneration. Nurturance, to encourage fresh growth. Regeneration, to serve Mother Earth. These principles are central to true womanhood, encouraging growth in others and thereby encouraging growth in yourself too, of course. But by encouraging growth in others and future generations, we ensure a future for the next generation. And we do so by serving Mother Earth, who is perfectly capable of regenerating herself and regenerating us. These are the deep laws of lion-hearted leadership that I teach. And essentially, these are the laws of the lioness, who, as we know, will do anything for the future generation. A lioness is associated with that fierce love that will give her life to protect her cubs. If we truly are looking at how to protect our children in our times, we will be focusing on that Indigenous consciousness that serves nature as a sacred heritage. I wish you a blessed Women's Day. Love to you from the heart of White Lion Ancestral Territories.
Thank you so much, Linda. What an extraordinary presentation. How wonderful to receive that all the way from the heart of White Lion territory in the Timbavati region of South Africa. I'm now really privileged to introduce our next speaker to you, Zelda Holtzman. At the age of 20, Zelda was elected to the executive committee of the United Women's Organization at its founding conference in 1981. UWO was the first non-racial women's organization in the Western Cape. Zelda is a lifelong activist for social justice and currently is the executive director of Chisimani Center for Activist Education. She's also a member of Defend Democracy Western Cape. Zelda Holtzman, the platform is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. What an absolute privilege to be here and to share with such amazing people. I must admit, I had no idea what I was letting myself into when Defend Democracy requested a space in this program, which obviously is a very involved and very intense program. And the Cape Town Unitarians agreed. And then somebody suggested I do it, and here I am. I don't know why I said yes, but I think I am so blessed for being here. So thank you very much. It's been an amazing experience thus far. So I'll try and be very brief because I'm aware that we've been at it for quite a bit. So I bring greetings from Defend Democracy Western Cape. And also salutations to the organizing team for putting an amazing event together. I'm really impressed having sort of voices from all over, not only South Africa, but also in hearing Indigenous women speak is really deeply encouraging. So yes, I mean, I think of this day today in South Africa as August the 9th, and as a young woman growing up as an activist from an early age, this was a day that had particular significance because I'm sure we could all reflect on the importance of our mother and our mother's mothers. And when we heard the stories about our mothers taking to the streets, to march to Parliament, to present a petition to the sitting apartheid government of the day, because they've had enough, then indeed it must be inspirational, because the women in 1956 didn't just land at the doorsteps or the lawns, or even far they got to the union buildings. They were unwelcome guests, unwelcome people, unrecognized people. They were people who were intended and meant to carry a pass to prove their right to be in a specific place at a specific time only. So their right to liberty and freedom and democracy and everything else that goes with it was represented by that document that stripped them from the last bit of humanity they were trying to hold on to. And they said, we've had enough. So that for me was truly a remarkable event, because I often reflected on how the women got there. Some came from rural areas, from farms, from little villages, from places all over South Africa. And it must have taken a lot of sacrifice to do that. Who was going to take care of the children? What will happen in their absence? What would happen along the way? What would happen when they get there? And despite all of those concerns, they landed and they did what they needed to do. And that was to say to Strydom, you have struck a woman, you have struck a rock, and usakufa, you will die. Now, as it's happened, I mean, he died of a heart attack, but maybe 20,000 women telling him, you struck a rock, you will die. Maybe that brought it on. Anyway, we could speculate about it. But I think what is as we go on, sort of from acknowledging our mothers of the time of 1956 and the struggles that women had to go through, and the youth and workers and others, etc., to bring us to a point of 1994, on the back of the struggles largely of women, largely poor women, working class women, ordinary women on farms, etc., that got us to this point where we could celebrate democracy, to the extent that we are prepared to defend the democracy we have. While saying that, we're also mindful that democracy isn't equally spread for everyone. We've got the architecture, we've got the framework, we have an amazing constitution, we've got the legislative frameworks, we've got the accountability frameworks. But if we for a moment just imagine the different lives of people who have different access to the democracy, the freedoms, and everything that is promised in the Constitution, then we realize that the effect of inequality, growing unemployment, increased hunger and poverty, we could arguably say that women, mostly Black women, mostly Indigenous women, suffer the brunt of the effects of all those inequalities. And you add on top of that the COVID-19 impact of lack of access to health and safety. And you think of women living in a shack where even that is a feat based on a struggle to get a space to put your shack, only to be evicted, to then find another space to have shelter for your family. And that is a daily experience. From the moment women wake up, they wake up to a crisis. How am I going to feed the kids today? Are they going to be safe? If people living in gang-infested areas, are my children coming home alive today? Will I get work today? Will the work that I have, the job I have, would I still have it tomorrow? And so it continues, one crisis after the other. It's a continuous cycle of crises. To the moment you get to bed, you close your eyes and you can't sleep deeply because you're still worried about what the next day would bring, or in fact, what it will not bring. So we think very deeply about what it means to defend democracy, because democracy, as I indicated, is not equally spread. But this democracy that we have, fragile as it is, we should defend this democracy and build to have a full attainment of democracy in its fullest sense as was intended in the Constitution. And I'm not thinking the President had a reshuffle the other night, and it's a lot of speculation and memes about a reshuffle. I won't go into the Afrikaans translation of the Reverend Miriam will probably stop me at that point. But it is just that, it's reshuffling people from what you have. And is that the best of talent we have as South Africa? Do we deserve what we got? Or do we have our talents beyond the reaches of the union buildings and TNAs and parliaments? And it's when you look at the forum in front of me and everyone else behind us all, that is where the talent for a true democracy that's based on care, on caring, on love and loving, of giving and sharing. And if we don't have those elements, then democracy would remain that framework where we go to the polls every 5 years and we cast our votes. But the lack of caring, the lack of sharing, the lack of humility, the lack of grace would deepen that divide, not only on an economic level, but on the social level, on the social relational level, even more so. So it's from that point of view that we really cherish the initiatives of platforms such as this, such as the Cape Town Unitarians, such as the interfaith communities, because that keeps us alive to our consciousness and our conscience of what we should be and should become as a people, united in our diversity and united in our action. So I indicated I'll be short. We look forward as the Defend Democracy to walk this path and to journey alongside you and many others who love freedom and cherish the ideals of care, and certainly in our care and in our unity lies our hope. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Holtzman, for that valuable information. And now I would like to present to you Megan Bock, who will be giving us some music.
I have to take a breath. My heart is overflowing with gratitude and deeply moved by all that has been brought today, and to thank everybody. Imagine I'm here on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean in a different hemisphere, and yet so touched, so moved, so inspired by everybody. Thank you. We're coming to the close of our program, and before I introduce our last speaker, I want to thank everybody for your participation, for your attendance, and also for hanging in with us. I realize that we're running over time, despite all of our very best efforts. We won't keep you much longer, but please stay, because our last speaker, I feel, has something very profound and applicable, and also a universal message for us all. And it's something that has been inspired by so many of the people that have spoken today, but it keeps ringing in my ears, so I want to share it with you. It's a prayer in a way that we used to share when we gathered together in my spiritual gatherings, both in New York and also in Sydney. And it really is this: it's simple but profound. And may we take it all in. Peace in my heart brings peace to my family. Peace in my family brings peace to my community. Peace in my community brings peace to my nation. And peace in my nation brings peace to the world. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. And now it's my very, very great honor to hand over the final portion of today to Pat McCabe. Her native name translates in English as Woman Stands Shining. She is Dine, which is the Navajo nation. She is mother, grandmother, activist, artist, writer, ceremonial leader, and international speaker. She is a voice for global peace and global healing. She draws upon the indigenous sciences of thriving life to reframe questions about sustainability and tolerance, and she is devoted to supporting the next generations. A combination of teachings and inspiration for Women's Nation and Men's Nation in being functional members of what she calls the hoop of life and upholding the honor of being human. Pat, thank you. She's coming to us from New Mexico in the United States.
Thank you so much, Pippa. And I want to say greetings to each one. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining this beautiful gathering. So I'll say yat ea bene she ya tachi inishli aro ashi ibashichi ma edishkeshne dashanale klaus chi dawshiche gwataus tari inishli. So I'm letting you know about my clans. We get our clans from our mothers. And it's such a beautiful time of day where I am. I've been watching the sky turn a little bit light. It's very early here. So this is a very powerful time for me to be able to share some words and prayer with you. I want to acknowledge that I'm stepping into a vision as I understand it. I'm stepping into women's vision here, the vision of creating this convergence between the Women's Day and Indigenous Peoples Day. So that is hallowed ground. That is hallowed ground when we have the willingness, courage, and strength to notice, to allow the visions to come through as Women's Nation, and when we collaborate with our sisters, and when we bring it into the world. I feel that the Women's Nation has a very specific gift for being able to receive guidance, nurturing, nourishment, instruction from this Mother Earth, and that we are to bring our visions and dreams forward at this time. Our societies cannot be healthy and whole unless we do that. So I'm very, very honored to step into this space with you here at this time. I had the opportunity to go to South Africa in 2018, and there were so many things that were shown to me and my sisters there as I traveled with my sisters, and as we were acting on vision, as we were acting on a calling from that land, from that part of the Mother Earth. And what I was told when I was there is that the world can never be whole until Africa is whole again, until the way that the Mother Earth expresses herself as human being in all of the many different places of the vast continent of Africa, until those ways are being enacted once again. And so I bring from my own people and my own nation what we hold both in the Dene, from Dene Nation, and as was mentioned, I was adopted into the Lakota spiritual way of life. And what has been given to me and shown to me there, I bring all of that in support of all of the efforts that are taking place throughout the continent, and in particular today, thinking of South Africa. I was listening to our sister talk about the trauma, and I want to say that perhaps you are aware that in our part of the world, we are experiencing a pretty profound, I guess I'll say, awakening, reckoning. We in what is now called Canada, we are hearing about the discovery of mass graves with children's bodies in them that are on the grounds of residential boarding schools that our children were kidnapped and taken to. And so it's a time of deep feeling of many different kinds. And so I want to share with you what Spirit shared with me about this. In general, Spirit has said to me about all the different traumas that arise for me as an Indigenous person who was subjected to attempted genocide on our continent. Spirit has said to me, it never touched you. Spirit says that to me all the time. It made me cry. It never touched you. It never touched you. And it's been a very confusing thing for me to have Spirit say that to me over and over again. But slowly I've been able to open, because Spirit doesn't ever say those things to me if they're not true. And if there isn't something for me in that. And so, you know, with this arising in our part of the world, I'm looking at what's taking place, and there's so much pain, there's so much grief, there's so much I'm going to say horror, there's so much anger as well arising with these discoveries. But first I want to say that is it really a discovery? Indigenous families have known for decades what took place. They know about how their family members disappeared. So it's not really a discovery there. It's something that we have known. And the people who enacted these atrocities, they also knew what was taking place. Some of them are still alive. Some of them have carried on legacies from the churches that participated in these schools. So it's not really a discovery there either. So what is this then? It's a reckoning, it's an awakening of an understanding of what can happen in our humanity. And so what Spirit has said to me is, you have to be disciplined. When Spirit says it never touched you, when I'm witnessing, you know, this reckoning, because suddenly the world is co-witnessing with us what took place. And that's what's new. That's what's new. We've known, but to have a co-witness of the world watching and acknowledging what took place, that is releasing something that has been almost frozen inside of us. And so Spirit has said to me, listen, you have to have the strength to acknowledge that the price was already paid for that atrocity. Those children paid with their lives. They've already paid it. You must not hop in the grave with them. You are accountable for your own time, for your own circumstances. You are accountable for your own consent and dissent at this moment. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? So as an Indigenous person, this is a very tall spiritual order, because we are so often taught to remember our ancestors, to remember their teachings, to remember their medicine, to remember the beauty that they would send forth. As we say, we are living the prayers of our grandmothers and grandfathers right now. And so it's a tall order to say that I have to leave their experience with them. Spirit has said literally to me, you must not hop in the grave with those children. You must live this life that you have been given here. And so this is taking a tremendous amount of self-discipline and willingness. And the only way that, you know, I can do that is to know that there is a higher purpose. That there is a very long story being told. And I am not a single individual. I am not a single generation. I'm always moving with 3 generations behind me in the present, 3 generations ahead of me. And we're traveling along together. And I can be someone who can act for the well-being of that whole line, that troop of us that are traveling together every day and every moment. So my accountability is changing. I wanted to say also that, you know, in our ways, we have ceremony too. We have what we call the wiping of the tears. And that ceremony takes place after we lose someone. It takes place a year after their passing, into the next world. And so I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about the way that is held. I'm thinking about how in that ceremony a year later, the community all comes together. The community all comes together and says to the individual who has lost a loved one, we understand that you have had a loss. We understand the grief. We understand how that is, that life isn't going to be the same. It can't be the same without your loved one, because we also have experienced this. And so we want to say that we are here as community to hold you, and to invite you to step into the what is next. And we will be here with you. We will be here for you. We invite you into the future of your life that is now different, but nevertheless, it's being offered to you. So this is part of the spirit of that ceremony. And so that's what I'm feeling here. And that's what I'm feeling here, even from the church in this instance, is there's an opportunity to be held, to hold each other, to be able to choose. Our volition, our consent is such a holy, holy gift to each and every one of us in every moment. Powerful, powerful. Every time we engage our consent or our dissent, we engage spiritual law. And so to be in community that is inviting us to give our consent to travel forward in a way that can bring life, in a way that supports thriving life. This is powerful community. And look at us, we have this capacity to do this in this way, in this format, to be able to hold each other, to be able to speak these things that we've been speaking. I wanted to say also that, I've been saying to activists for quite some time, I think it's Einstein who said you cannot simultaneously prepare for war and peace. But I am saying we have to do that exactly. That's exactly the task at hand here. Because on the one hand, we do have to express our consent and our dissent. We have to exercise that power that comes with the laws of the construct that is a free will construct. And so we've been listening to how that is being expressed in different ways by some of the speakers who came before me. So that is the war, I guess you could say. But we also have to be prepared for peace, because as this Mother Earth changes, as the changes sweep over this whole Mother Earth, a willingness is going to arise. As the suffering is increasing, more and more willingness is arising. That is why this constellation is able to be here today the way it is. A willingness has arisen within each one of us. And we understand this opportunity to come together, to collaborate, to commiserate, to speak of what is possible. And so we have to keep that place in our heart at any moment to have our quote unquote enemy, our opposition, come into that softness, come into that place of recognizing, oh, maybe I need to look at this another way. Maybe what was taking place in the past was incorrect. And so this is the spiritual task, I feel like, I see it as an Indigenous woman, that my ceremonies can give me a capacity to make a place for that turning. But I think in every one of our spiritual practices, we can make that place for that turning of a way of thinking, of a way of being, and be able to receive with kindness, with goodness, with willingness. And for me, the root of being able to do that is just taking a good look at my mother, taking a look at my Mother Earth here, and seeing how she receives us no matter what we do. No matter what kinds of actions we take upon her, she arrives and arrives and arrives and arrives, always with the possibility of more life, more life, more life, more life. So as the female, we say that I am synonymous with earth. I am synonymous with life. So I call myself Holy Earth Surface Walker, Life Bringer, Life Bearer. And I stand with the full authority of the Mother Earth behind me, with me, as me. And it's always my place to speak on behalf of life and to ask my community, are we placing life at the center? Are we placing life at the center? Because if we are not, then we must begin again. Now, it might seem that our voice can be lost in the crowd, but I'm going to say to you that standing with the full authority of the Mother Earth behind us, that voice will not be lost. We are aligning with the true authority here of our physical realm. I say the Mother Earth interprets the spirit to us as embodied human beings. So I encourage us to keep speaking because we stand with that authority. And the final thing I guess I'll leave us with is I had an opportunity. It was great to see Linda Tucker. I had an opportunity to go to Timbavati. And, you know, I am thinking white lions. And I tried to get myself to calm down. It was so exciting. And I said, well, you know, you might catch a glimpse of something way in the distance. You never know. But we drove onto the property. And as we came around this bend, there were two male white lions. They were kind of facing like this, and they had their paws crossed. And it's like they were just waiting for us there. And I was told later that that was quite unusual. As we drove by, I mean, they were probably 20 feet away from where we were driving. We stopped next to them and they stood and they just looked at us. But there was a power that came through them and to me, in which they said to me very clearly, they said, you must stop seeing this life as fragile. This life is not fragile. It's only fragile in your mind. You must stop thinking that way. You must stop thinking that way. This life is powerful. This life is strong. This life is directed. So move and act as knowing that this is the truth. And so this has been a tremendous gift for me from that land to move with confidence at how powerful this life is. And what an incredible honor to be embodied here on this Mother Earth, receiving life from her, but also being, you know, my prayer at this time has been to be a human being such that the way that I live, the way that I conduct myself, causes all other life to thrive. That's what I want to know. How do I be that being? How do I be that being that my very existence supports all the rest of the life? So I want to say thank you to each and every one for all the work that went into putting this together, for those of you who have joined and spoken with us. And I'm so honored, and I feel the beauty of this meeting of two or more to serve the very highest possibility for life, light, and love. So thank you so much. And I will also say aho mitakwie oyasin for all my relations.
I just want to thank Pat McCabe for this message. I'm humbled to receive the message from you. And yeah. So the feminine voice and the voice of the Indigenous peoples have been silenced for too long. For too long. Globally, we can clearly see what colonialism, the church, expansionism has done to the loss of tradition, language, spirituality, land, and even more. I am a product of that loss. We can clearly see the global impact it has on humanity. So my question, how do we stop the continued loss of ancient Aboriginal wisdom? How do we give respect back to the earth, to humanity? The power of Indigenous knowledge is so profound and vital in promoting overall life and livelihood. There's a need for healing, need for respect, need for unity, and need for the voiceless to be heard. The earth is yearning for regrowth. With the help of you all, I'm offering myself as a bridge for healing, a bridge from having no identity to acceptance of individuality, a bridge of hope, a bridge of compassion. I'm appreciative, I'm humbled by all the offerings of each and every single person within the borders of South Africa and beyond, who made this vision of uplifting the feminine voice and indigeneity a reality. So may the connections and the offerings shared today be extended and be blessings to us all, to all beings on earth. Gratitude to you all. Kangans.